my friends, welcome back to Salt City Hoops. Once again, how was your All-Star break? We'll talk about everything that has happened over the past week in Jazz land and the NBA land, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you. My name is Mark Pereira, here with Salt City Hoops, coming at you solo on catching. There's just so much Jazz stuff, as always, and I want to get into a couple matters today that hopefully you enjoy in your eye holes and your ear holes when you following the rest of this languid Jazz season. As we get into the home stretch of a non-playoff year, you're thinking, okay, what am I here to care about, right? The Jazz are on the news for sordid tanking reasons. Are we going to have more discussion about that? Well, yeah, maybe a little later. But also, what is worth watching? How was the All-Star break? What do I have to know about these new players on the Jazz who are playing, right? Two-way players and also the non-Jaren Jackson traded for players. So I want to spend today, which we're sitting here on, I'm recording this on Saturday night. The Jazz played against the Grizzlies last night on Friday night in a double tank-off because the Memphis Grizzlies are sitting in the 8th or 9th position, I think, in the lottery standings. And they are not playing for anything. Obviously, they traded away Jaren Jackson Jr., but John Morant's not really seeing the floor, and the Grizzlies are just waving the towel on the season, which is appropriate. But in today's NBA, waving the towel means, oh, we're gonna try to suck as hard as possible, and the Jazz lost in a game that, based on the talent on the floor, was actually it was a road game, but I was disappointed in the loss. I make no bones about it. Every loss is a positive for the Jazz as far as the team construct and keeping our draft pick that is top 8 protected to Oklahoma City, as I always say, just to remind everybody. It's definitely good for the team in the long run, but it is, when you're looking at the future of the Jazz, and this is actually what I want to get into. I was skipping over a lot of my perfunctory introductory stuff about the All-Star break, but I do want to get into the quality of the players on the floor for the Jazz and the fact that they matter for where the Jazz are going. Like, the people out there are not irrelevant to next year's successful Jazz team. But I hope you all enjoyed the All-Star break. I get a little itchy without NBA basketball after a couple days. It seems like the NBA also in its socials love advertising the celebrity game a whole lot with people that I'm aware of their existence. I'm just surprised to see 7 or 8 separate Instagram posts about Glorilla, who is a popular rapper and is Brandon Ingram's girlfriend or fiance, I forget which, but it was multiple posts about her, and I was like, okay, we don't need every post about that. Of course, I'm not sitting there watching the Ruffles celebrity game. Utah legend Taylor Frankie Paul also played in that for my my Secret Lives of Mormon Wives friends. I do not watch that show, but I know this is a Utah podcast. There's going to be some fans of that. And of course, the All-Star game is just not. I got 3 little kids, man. I gotta decide with. I already negotiate at home with my wife. We're like, okay, what sports events am I locked in on and I'm watching, right? Or what things do I want to say, hey kids, come around, let's watch this. And my kids still, I can't get quite all of them into watching the sports that are on TV. But the All-Star game is not something that I can say look, this is taking TV time in the middle of the day. And I'm it's mountain time, so it's not totally in the evening. So not really an All-Star game. I'm glad that it was a little bit more competitive than usual. Let it be known that the format was not the reason it was competitive. It was competitive because people decided to make it competitive. Remember, the first year of the Elam ending was a very competitive game. And everyone said it's the Elam ending. That's the reason it's competitive. And there's charities involved for each quarter or whatever. And no, it turns out just people just randomly decided to care that year. And so people like Wembanyama this year are the reason that I guess people cared. I hope you had fun. I enjoyed the Olympics. That's the sports we can throw on during the All-Star break. I actually was a curler way back in high school. And after I graduated high school, college, and then law school, and then life, and everything else got in the way of actually getting back on the sheet. But I love curling unironically. It's just always been a sport I enjoy. Maybe perhaps I'll get back out there here in Colorado. I can't ski though, and I can't skate, but I admire them nonetheless. So I'm curious if you enjoy the Olympics and what you're looking out for. We'll wake up early tomorrow morning, watch USA Canada hockey. So when the Olympics are over, though, we're gonna circle on back to Jazz basketball. The Jazz have their second and final national TV game on Monday against the Rockets. Lauri Markkanen was out against the Grizzlies for an illness, undisclosed illness. He'll surely be back for the national TV game unless they get slapped with a quadrillion-dollar fine. And so I just found myself so the Jazz had a 12-point lead going into the second half, and rooting for losses is just like not. I don't find myself cheering on like a Memphis basket or something like that. So it's a little against like my nature, but so I'm not necessarily cheering for a loss there, but it always strikes me the way the Jazz have been losing the past 2 years. And what I mean by that is losing in manners that leave you feeling like nobody on the roster who played should continue, right? Aside from Ace Bailey, who, as a rookie who has shown a whole bunch of star pedigree, who gets a lot of leash in my brain for where he's going to be, and he was not blameless. But blowing that 12-point, half-point lead, which isn't like a huge lead for, in the modern NBA, but it's still a sizable lead, and then a really, really, really awful fourth quarter. You start looking around at all of these other rotation players who are on the Jazz right now, who, unlike Memphis, is rolling out random dudes for like several minutes. And the Jazz were not without playing a fair share of their random dudes. Like recent two-way signing Blake Hinson played 16 minutes. Oscar Tshiebwe played 14 minutes. He actually had to come in. He almost had to play 48 minutes after Kyle Filipowski got slammed in the face and had a bloody nose that kicked him out of the game for a couple minutes. And we went to the locker room. So the Jazz played a couple random two-way guys, but the Grizzlies played a lot of random dudes who are on 10 days and will never play in the NBA again if they're lucky, including Utah Ute legend Lawson Lovering. He had 11 points and 11 rebounds, stealing a block. Like, he's not playing in the NBA anytime soon. So for the Jazz to have a 1-point lead going into the fourth and end up losing by 9 when they're playing a lot of the players that we care about. They're playing Filipowski 28 minutes. Cody Williams plays 38 minutes. John Conchar, who is on a guaranteed contract for $6 million next year, right? He's a relevant player to this, what the Jazz are doing. You can't just cut the guy. I mean, you can, but you're eating that salary. It's just not something the NBA teams do too often. He's at 31 minutes. Isaiah Collier, 25 minutes. Ace Bailey, 33 minutes. Bryce Sensabaugh, only 19 minutes, in part because he was horrible. Like, he was not pulled because of quality, right? This is a game that had Bryce Sensabaugh minutes written all over it. He couldn't get on the floor. Instead, Vince Williams plays 23 minutes. Kevin Love played 5 minutes, and he had 2 threes and a fabulous assist, and they pulled him immediately. So he had 6 points in 5 minutes. But all these players, so I'm going to go down again. All these players played relevant minutes in this game. In a game that the Jazz blew to a team that on paper has way worse talent. Kyle Filipowski, Cody Williams, John Conchar, Isaiah Collier, Ace Bailey, Bryce Sensabaugh, and Vince Williams all played 20 minutes or more. The team had 24 turnovers. And just getting, I'm a fantasy basketball junkie. I'm in a 30-team real salary NBA fantasy league where it's a roto style, 30-team style. So you gotta be on top of your random dudes and maybe help push to the playoffs and everything. So I know all of these, and like I'm learning new players via the Memphis Grizzlies. We all know who Omax Prosper is. You know, he was a Dallas Mavericks draft pick and everything, but he's been kind of buried in no man's land and looks out of the NBA. Well, he had 23 points off the bench. But the random players, like Javon Small has been around a little bit, I guess. Like, I think I do remember Javon Small. Yeah, like he's played, this is his 21st game, so I recall him a little bit, but not like intensely so. But Lawson Lovering, I only knew him because of the Utes connection. And Jemai Mashak. Like, I don't even know how to pronounce this dude's name. All due respect to Jemai Mashak. Jemai Mashak. I don't know who he is. I don't know where he played college. Says he plays college ball at Tennessee. You know what? Now that I think about Tennessee, they had a good tournament run. 59th pick in last year's draft. Okay. The Jazz have had their fair of 59th picks. Forget if it was Nigel Williams-Goss or Mie Oni or whatever. Justin Wright Foreman, Jarrell Brantley. Hey, we're remembering some guys on the Salt City Hoops podcast. That's not unfamiliar territory. Anyways, the Grizzlies are playing nonsense players, right? And the Jazz are playing real players, as in these are players the Jazz have drafted or expect them to be part of the rotation going forward. At this point, and the reason this game angered me, but the reason I'm really going to be focused on the Jazz games going the rest of the season, and give I think all of you a reason to watch these games, because unlike the Grizzlies and some other teams who are playing your Jemai Mashaks and Lawson Loverings, the Jazz are going to continue to roll out their youth out there. Another reason this whole thing about the Jazz being targeted for tanking is a little nonsense, because the Jazz are not playing bullshit players. They're playing real players that matter. But if the Jazz can't close out a game like that against this terrible Memphis team with these players, it makes you alarmist about the future of their basketball lives. And if I am one of these players, you have to go into every game thinking, I am fighting for my basketball life out here. That is the intensity that I think they all need to show, because their jobs are not, oh, pat you on the back, get a little better every year, that's fine. There are 0 guaranteed minutes for any of those players outside of Ace Bailey. 0. And in some cases, like Kyle Filipowski, there's not even money guaranteed next year. Now, do we pick up Kyle Filipowski's non-guarantee for $3 million? It's $3 million. I think it's a reasonable bet that he'll get picked up for $3 million. But he ain't owed that money. Svi Mikhailuk was a DNP coach's decision just because he's too good of a player. Right now, Bryce Sensabaugh, Isaiah Collier, Cody Williams, all these players, they couldn't beat out Svi Mikhailuk for a rotation spot next year. Svi Mikhailuk also on a $3-ish million non-guarantee next year. I'd be stunned if Svi was not brought back, and I would be profoundly disappointed if, after what we saw from Svi this year, which is a good player, I'd be profoundly disappointed if Svi was in the rotation next year for a playoff-bound team. Now, if he's playing 12 minutes a night as 8th, 9th man, maybe I won't be profoundly disappointed. But, and I know there was a sickness and an injury involved, but the fact that he started the season over Ace Bailey was already kind of like a wrinkle in my forehead a little bit. And then he just was continued to be relied upon over all of those players I mentioned, as a player who's going to play with all these other good players. Like when he was playing with Kessler and Markkanen, and he will play with Jaren Jackson Jr. and Keontae George and all these things. These players need to be better than Svi. Like it needs to happen. And so right now, as you're playing out these last 30 games of the season, 25 games really. Am I counting this right? 57. Yeah, 25 games. Wow. Season's flying. Yes, the offseason will obviously matter. Training camp will matter. Summer league for a lot of these players will matter. Now, it'll be interesting to see what 30-year players the Jazz send in the summer league. The Jazz are notorious for sending, not notorious is kind of a strong word, but the Jazz will send third-year players at least to their home Salt Lake City summer league, right? Walker Kessler 2 years ago, Bryce Sensabaugh this past summer. So I don't think it'll be crazy to see some Cody Williams, Kyle Filipowski, Isaiah Collier minutes perhaps at Summer League. So in any event, those things will matter. And all these players have, unless they get traded, like aside from Filipowski, a lot of these players do have guaranteed contracts for next year. I think Cody Williams has played himself just enough to have his option picked up in October. So remember, for these rookies, you pick up the following year's option in the fall. So I think Cody Williams has shown enough. I think he'll need a good training camp to show it, but his guarantee is only about $6 or $7 million for the 2 years from now. So I think they will pick up his option. Yeah, $7.669 million is his salary for 2027. So I think he's played enough to get his option picked up for that year. But it still starts now. Like, all these games matter for them. Because the Jazz are trying to win next year. And not just, okay, we're ascending, we're going to try to win 34 games next year. Nope, the Jazz are trying to win as many, like 50 games. And whether you think 50 games is crazy or not for this Jazz team next year, that is the goal. Like that is not a crazy aspiration. And if you can't help this team, you do not play. And if you do not play minutes, you don't get another contract. Goodbye, NBA. Because you can't show what you're worth in the NBA without being on the floor. That's why players are rightfully demand minutes all the time. I want minutes. Well, here are your minutes. And so when you're blowing leads against the Magic a couple weeks ago in the famous Lowry Markkanen and Jaren Jackson sitting in the fourth quarter game, when you're blowing leads like that and you're blowing leads against the shitty Grizzlies by turning the ball 24 times, Kyle Filipowski had 5 turnovers. He shot the ball fine, but his defense was horrible and he turned the ball over 5 times. Decent fantasy player. He had 2 steals and 2 blocks. Played 28 minutes. Those are nice little defensive stats, but and sometimes you wonder, like, well, is he being miscast defensively as a 5 when we know that's not it? And I don't mean to pick on Filipowski's defense too much, but like the rest of it goes down the board. Like Cody Williams 4 turnovers, Isaiah Collier 4 turnovers, Ace Bailey 3 turnovers, Bryce Sensabaugh with 3 turnovers, and he was 4-12 from the field. And going back to what I was kind of introducing a little earlier, it's also like the way they lose. And I think a lot of these turnovers, what drove me nuts last year, and the end of the season, I became really despondent. Like, I don't know where this team is going. Is so many of these turnovers were just G League level dribbling off your foot, you try to do a move and it slips off your. Does anyone remember playing NBA Street and you try to do a fancy dribble move with a player with poor handles and you would fall down? That happened a lot against Memphis. Ace Bailey did it a couple times. Bryce Sensabaugh did it a couple times. These are the sorts of unacceptable turnovers. Just live ball nonsense. We see often these growing teams, you'll see a player throw a ball to nobody or throw a ball out of bounds expecting a player to be there. Those are totally acceptable for a team of where it's going. Now the coaches, who knows how much the player who made the mistake, if it was the cutting player, the player who threw the ball, how serious of a mistake it was. Sometimes it could be worse or better of a mistake depending on like what is actually the expectation on that given play. But it's universal that if you're dribbling the ball off your foot or just trying to dribble the ball around a screen and you just lose the ball, that's just, can't trust you out there ever. The shooting is also kind of an issue. Bryce Sensabaugh is still 1 of 4 from 3. Team as a whole was 13 of 34, propped up by 2 of 2 from Kevin Love and 3 of 3 from Blake Hinson, who looked great as a two-way guy. Maybe I'll have more on Blake Hinson in a minute. But all of these players are slotted for 0 minutes next year. You know, you look at who's on the roster, right? So, all right, count with me. Got Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., Keontae George, Walker Kessler, Ace Bailey, right? There's 5 players that you know are in the rotation. Nobody else is guaranteed. You think about, Isaiah Collier, Vince Williams, Bryce Sensabaugh, no. Nobody's guaranteed rotation minutes after that. The 6th rotation spot is for sure whatever the backup center is, right? Whether we bring back Yusuf Nurkic or sign some other guy, I don't think that it's tenable to go into a year, and I think the Jazz agree with this, saying, well, whenever Kessler's not on the floor, Jaren Jackson Jr. will play center. I think there will be a regular backup center in the rotation. Maybe it's not even an every night thing, but if there's a player who is going to say, I'm playing with the Utah Jazz knowing I have a regular rotation spot, whether that's Yusuf Nurkic or somebody else. So that's 6 guys. Those are your starters and the backup center, whoever that is. And obviously the team will need to fill out the rest of the rotation. It could be the players on the team, of course. But and we know Kyle Filipowski can't be the backup center. He's a 4. The entire rest of the rotation is up for grabs. And it's not up for grabs in a way of the bullshit over the past 3 seasons. It is up for grabs insofar as the Jazz need quality minutes here. And if you don't provide quality minutes here, you don't play minutes. You don't get any of those minutes. They're not up for grabs, and your competition is your fellow young players. Your competition is the entire market of the NBA. The Jazz will have a full mid-level exception, and they'll have the rest of the John Collins traded player exception, which should be about $11, $12 million, to get 2 very quality players. Free agent class is looking, whatever, but the Jazz could. The Jazz aren't trying to bring in a star. You're trying to bring in a couple decent, like Bruce Brown or something like that. Who knows? Like, random example, Bruce. But you get those 5 starters and you get your backup center. Let's call it Nurkic just for the sake of argument. And the Jazz very well just as easily for the 7th and 8th and 9th man in the rotation say, all right, so we drafted a great rookie at 5th or 6th, he's in the rotation. And maybe not as a nightly thing, too. Like, if the Jazz jump up and get a Boozer, a Debacle, or a Peterson, like, that's in the rotation. Okay, all of a sudden you've been usurped. All of a sudden. And if you draft a player like Darren Peterson, you're looking at Isaiah Collier saying, like, you don't play unless you are actually a value add to a playoff team. Otherwise, you don't play. Because we're going to invest in the Darren Peterson trajectory more than you. And also Darren Peterson probably right now, if you put Darren Peterson on the NBA floor right now, he's probably better than Collier. I'm a Collier. You all have heard my pro Collier stance too. I don't say that lightly. But using the upcoming free agency and the tools that the Jazz have, the Jazz could very easily sign a player over Bryce, sign a player over Kyle Filipowski, sign a player over Isaiah Collier to win basketball games. Now the Jazz are a forward-looking organization. They don't rob Peter to pay Paul. And the talent trajectory and investing in the youth is still something that the Jazz can continue to do. But they're going to focus on Ace Bailey and the rookie we draft in this upcoming summer, right? The rest of these players are all like nice. Well, we'll see what happens to you if you can get there. No sacred cows here. And so bringing back to like what you're watching night after night, it's like I need to watch 38 minutes of Cody Williams and feel like, now this is a guy we can stick on James Harden if we really need to for 12 minutes. I don't feel like that. I want to look at Isaiah Collier and think like backup point guard. Nailed it. 15 minutes. Can play alongside Keontae. Can play alongside Darren Peterson. Whatever happens. Because I trust that he's doing the things defensively. Like, we can get a little bit more micro here with Isaiah. I'll always say right off the bat, I do not care about Isaiah Collier's shooting. Why don't I care about his shooting? Because that's something that will raise Collier's ceiling a lot higher if he can get the shooting in. But right now, I'm focused on Collier's floor, especially for a team trying to be a playoff team next year. And Collier's floor is dependent on turnovers, for one, and defense. Collier's way too quick and strong combined. Take the vertical athleticism aside, his quickness and his strength are way too good to be a bad defender. I want him to be more of a pesky bully. Like, you are out there to be an insane person. Yes, we're relying on you to be the captain point guard right now. And playing way too many minutes. I thought it was funny. He didn't play 48 minutes against the Grizzlies. We gave all of his backup point guard minutes to Vince Williams. It was pretty good. I liked his defense. But I think, actually, that's a great comparison right there. Like, Isaiah Collier versus Vince Williams. Vince Williams can't hold a candle to any of the passing Collier can do. But he's got good size, good defense, and can shoot a little bit. And Isaiah Collier's passing, I think, is a little overrated. He's always going to be a great volume passer. And he can make every basic read in an NBA offense with his eyes closed. That's terrific. He does every B-level passing skill that you could possibly need. He's a fabulous, just put him out there, execute some basic stuff, and it'll help keep the offense going as long as he's not turning the ball over by dribbling it off of his foot. It's a big if, I guess. You really don't see Zay doing the manipulation type passing where he's feinting or baiting, or as soon as he's detects that a defender has taken one step in the wrong direction, he's whipping a pass to a player you didn't expect because that player is more open and only Isaiah could see it, right? The real A and S tier level passers do that manipulation and they have that advanced x-ray vision to make passes that lead into wide open shots. Zay doesn't do that yet. It's very helpful to have a player with his speed be able to make every B-level pass in the book with his eyes closed. It's very, very, very helpful. But we shouldn't think that he's like this passing wizard. He's a really, really good passer. He needs to have more. He needs to have more feel to become that extra level passer. So we'll see. So when it comes to like comparing with Vince Williams or really any like a person who could replace Zay, sure, Vince might not be somebody who can make every B-level pass in the book, but if you're saying, hey, Vince, for backup point guard spot duty, we need you to play 12, 15, 20 minutes. Actually, you're probably be playing with Keontae George for a lot of that, so you only have to really play pure point for maybe 8 of these minutes, 10, whatever. These are the things we're going to do. Execute these basic things. Collier might execute those basic things a little bit better, but Vince Williams gives you more size in shooting and defense alongside with it. So Collier, his competition is himself in a lot of the respects, because these are things he can improve on and then just steal that spot away from Vince or anybody else next year as the pure backup point guard. Shit, even a starter, if Ace Bailey goes down or something like that, there is point guard is the slowest burn in the NBA for young players to learn. Very optimistic on Collier. The shooting actually doesn't look terrible. He's 2 of 5 from 3 the other night, 4 or 6 from the free throw line. But like he's learned great little floater range stuff. I mentioned he's great at drawing fouls. He's great at getting to the rim. He's a good offensive player, I think. The shooting, I care that'll help raise his ceiling. I care less about that right now. 4 steals and 2 blocks for Collier too, by the way. His defense looked okay in his 25 minutes. Again, he was playing against pretty nonsense players for the Grizzlies. So Collier is a guy I'm watching the rest of the year. Like, how do you look against... And the reason this is better than preseason basketball is these young players are going to have to go up against players that are or teams that are trying to do things in the playoffs. They're fighting for playoff seeding. They're going to kick our ass and win by 15 points. But how do you look while you're losing? What good plays did you make? Did you get beat because the opponent is just that damn good? Like Houston, we're going against Alpi Şengün, Kevin Durant, all these great players. Like, okay. I'm going to excuse Cody Williams if he couldn't hold Kevin Durant under 30 points. But how does he look during that? Speaking of sacred cows, Ace Bailey's not guaranteed on this stuff. I want to emphasize that he's very firmly in the rotation next year because of how good he's been this year. But is Ace Bailey a 25-minute starter or is he a 34-minute starter and closing every game? Ace Bailey is still on the earning minutes plan. He had 6 rebounds in the first half. He had 0 rebounds in the second half. I say the word unacceptable a lot. I think that's unacceptable. He's going to be starting next year alongside Keontae George, Jaren Jackson Jr., Lauri Markkanen, and Walker Kessler. He very credibly is the worst player of those 5 and maybe the 4th offensive option. He's going to have a lot of minutes next year not only playing alongside those four, but I'm looking for Ace to earn more than the guaranteed 20, 25 minutes that he's given next year. And that comes with having fewer than 3 turnovers, shooting better from... He's got to be a better three-point shooter. He's been better lately. And rebounding the piss out of the basketball. He's had a couple games with 3 steals, and he's had a couple games with 3 blocks. I want him to be... There was a small stretch last night, last night, where he was the tallest player on the floor. We weren't playing Sheway or Filipowski for a minute. I think it was like for 4 or 5 minutes, and we were playing a crazy small lineup. And I'm not saying Ace Bailey should be a small ball 5 or something like that, but the dude is huge, and one of the strengths Utah's going to have next year is Ace Bailey playing shooting guard. I want him to rebound and block shots. The team might actually struggle with defensive rebound next year because of Lord knows what Jaren Jackson Jr., he's well known in his issues on that. Lauri Markkanen is capable in his zone, but Keontae is not going to really help there. And Walker Kessler is adequate for his size. He's better on the offensive glass. You're going to need Ace Bailey to be like, hey, you are the putback and rebounding king. So that's what I want to watch out of him. Or are we going to end up in a situation next year where we're closing a game and the 4 closers are known, right? Kessler, Jackson, Lowry, and Keontae. Also, Kessler is not guaranteed to close some of those games if, depending on, could have a Lowry and Jaren closing a game situation, of course. Depending on matchups. But Ace Bailey's not guaranteed to close those games if there's a better option out there, including Svi Mykhailiuk himself. Right? This is a team who's going to be light on dribbling and light on passing, and say nothing of Isaiah Collier. So, can Ace dribble enough? Can he rebound enough? Can he defend enough to not say, look, Ace, you're making too many mistakes out there, and you're not providing enough rebounding juice to justify putting you over the much better connector in Mykhailiuk. Boy, that would suck. So I know it's a rookie wall. He's got 25 games left in his rookie season. He's probably exhausted. He's probably got more aches and pains than he's ever had in his entire life, and he needs the offseason desperately. But this is learning the NBA moment for him. I'm not expecting perfection, and I would prefer the team lose games than they win them. But if he shows... And Memphis was actually a pretty solid outing for him. I want to leave the end of this season thinking, boy, Ace showed that he's ready to play 30 minutes a game next year. I have a nuclear hot take that I'm saving for the offseason about Ace and the Utah Jazz next year. It's nuclear. You'll have to stick around for it. Bryce Sensabaugh, I'm not going to... Our issues on people like Cody Williams and Bryce Sensabaugh are well known. So it's more like the struggles this year for both of those players. Obviously, Cody's gotten a little bit better, but he's still pretty bad. Those are the 2 players who are absolutely fighting for their lives next year. Because their next contract depends on it. Whether it be with Utah or someone else. So Bryce can be frustrated all he wants to. Straight up, man, look, he's 4 of 12 from the field last night, but only 1 of 4 from 3. A lot of weird, dumb shots from Bryce. And the offense might not have put him in a great spot a lot of the time, but 0 free throws, right? Team only shot 16 free throws as a whole. 9 of 16 from the free throw line. God, I didn't even realize how bad that was. There needs to be more of a reason to have Bryce Sensabaugh out there, and right now I see him as a 0-minute player next year. 0 minutes. So, it's same thing with Cody Williams. So fighting, I keep using that phrase because I'm beating around the idea of that these last 25 games should be intense as hell. They should be intense. You should have to put a hell of a lot of game tape out there that shows the management team that going into the offseason, you're not shipped off to some other sorry sad franchise who could bet on your second draft ability, right? Oh, send them off to the Kings to do Kings stuff. Send them off to the Pelicans to dick around for a while. With the Jazz being a playoff team next year, you are fighting to get paid a whole lot of money as a role player on a successful team rather than a crappy amount of money playing more minutes for a crappy team. Your future depends on you being a successful role player for a good team. There's plenty of shitty players who can play for crappy teams. They'll get paid minimums, and then they wash out of the NBA in favor of the next shiny new object coming out of the NBA draft. So these next 25 games should be intense and fiery. And if I detect slothful play and sloppy play, and not sloppy as in, we're kind of throwing a lot of new lineups out there. There's going to be certainly a rotation of random 10-day guys who make mistakes, and these players don't have the chemistry. It'll be obvious when you're watching a Jazz game when the mistakes are sloppy and lazy versus, I just don't know where things are right now, and I gotta take an isolation possession because I really just don't know what this team is doing right now. Vince Williams, same thing, by the way. He's I know we don't have as emotional attachment to he or John Conchar, but so John Conchar has a guaranteed contract, but again, he'll be an expiring contract next year, so he hasn't hit 30 years old yet. He's played a little bit in the NBA, but if he wants to stick around on a good team, he needs to show things. Hasn't made a 3 yet. I think he's 0 for 12 on 3 since he's been in Utah. Had 4 steals the other night, which is cool. But so we don't have as emotional attachment to Conchar or Vince Williams, but they are also in the same position. And if the Jazz are going to be a very good team next year, like the 50-win team, they're going to need production from these types of players. And if they don't get production from these types of players, the Jazz are going to make wholesale changes on that back end of the roster. The Jazz are only going to win 42 games next year, be a barely make the play-in team. And we'll all be throwing our hands up saying, what the hell was this all for? Sure, we tanked and got Darren Peterson or whatever. That's obviously a nice thing, but you do need 8-9 players to win playoff games. And right now, none of them are cutting it out. So, playtime's over, boys. It's time to really show that you can take it to good teams. Some of these games against bad teams will be kind of sloppy and weird. I'm more looking forward to the 15-point losses against the Houstons than I am the close games against the bad teams. First of all, against the bad teams, it's our tanking competition, so I'll just be more nervous. But if the Jazz find ways to lose those games, it's going to be because these guys look like shit, and it'll make me feel sad. Whereas if they go up against superior competition and put together 48 minutes of FU basketball, it'll be pretty promising. Who do I believe in? Pretty much just Isaiah. Ace Bailey's kind of guaranteed there, right? Vince Williams has had really good stretches and really bad stretches so far in the NBA. A little bit of an older dude. We'll see. He's on a very cheap, non-guaranteed contract next year. I think he's worth. I think he's certainly worth sticking around. But I have negative faith in Filipowski, Cody Williams, or Bryce Sensabaugh to be relevant on this team next year. And I'm hoping these last 25 games has me wrinkling my forehead a little bit. Because while I don't have that promise right now, that's what I'm looking for. And that's what I think you should look for too. I think these will be fun games, actually. Turn it off in the fourth quarter for a lot of them. But if the Jazz are playing in a random game tuning in to see what Cody Williams is looking like and Ace Bailey and everything is like, and everyone else that I mentioned, I think is worth it. And we'll see how much Lowry plays. Lowry will certainly play on Monday. Worth checking out. Okay, so I wanted to start with that because I did want to address some of the tanking and the Jazz fine and everything, but I didn't want to lead with that because I think a lot of people, maybe not everybody, I'm certainly not sick of it, but I think a lot of people are sick of tanking discussion and solutions and everything. But since the last time we spoke, there have been developments, and I think it is worth now kind of settling down our thoughts and really concluding them. I'm kind of a polarizing way on how I approach things because I love spitting off the hot take immediately and doing immediate reactions, but I also like to come back and reevaluate those positions as new information is revealed or as I just consider new opinions. No one needs to hear this, but I think that is an art that is being incredibly lost in mature adulthood these days, is reconsidering a strong opinion after listening to other people. That's all. I think people just don't do that anymore. You don't have to change your mind all the time or any of the time. But does it change your flavor of your opinion? Does it change how strongly you feel about that opinion? I think those are just things that we need to be more introspective about. And so after sitting and ruminating on this stuff for a week, obviously on last week's episode I gave a little intro to note that yes, there was a punishment for the Jazz for sitting Jaren Jackson Jr. and Lauri Markkanen in the fourth quarter of 2 weekend games for conduct detrimental to the league and affecting the quote-unquote integrity of the game. I mentioned that in an intro to an episode that I noted about the uproar of the Jazz tanking. But now we have a whole episode that I can kind of ruminate on that and my final thoughts and my final proposals. So what is absolutely true is the Jazz were unfairly targeted. The reason for that is simple. Many, many, many other teams have done exactly what the Jazz have done in prior years, and including this season. The strongest corollary is the Raptors doing it with Scotty Barnes last year. So while other teams can credibly go, you can't tell us what players to play in the fourth quarter or not because all our players suck. There's been a lot of teams who have rested their starters in the third and fourth quarters of games who aren't necessarily stars and who the talent difference between their starters and their bench players may not be as cavernous as Jaren Jackson Jr. and Lauri Markkanen versus Kyle Filipowski. Granted, but like the Raptors did this last year. A warning would have been a private warning, a very David Stern-like warning would have been appropriate. The pushback on giving the warning is that Adam Silver he's got to give a press conference at the All-Star break. He has to show that he's taking it seriously. And I just think you would have to be pretty miserable at PR. And like the NBA has a million PR folks, and Adam Silver is he loves the press conference. He is not shy about press conferences. He is not like the recent press conference we saw from the IOC president, who was asked a number of questions from reporters, and she looked at her team, her PR team, and said, like, oh, I'm looking at my team right now because I don't know anything about these very obvious questions. It's a funny clip. You should watch it. It's like classic example of somebody just completely out of their depth to lead a massive organization. But Adam Silver is not that. He's very good at answering questions, and he's very thoughtful about it, and he's prepared. So if all he had done was warn the Jazz in private, I think there's still a way he could have won the press conference. and said, totally understand what has happened. We're having meetings with general managers to discuss solutions for the future, and also putting the league on notice for the rest of the year that if this type of behavior continues, punishments like losing draft picks are still on the table. I think the media would walk away from that feeling like, oh, Silver's really pissed now. I don't think you needed the one-off rain and $500,000 fine to do that. So, yes, the Jazz were unfairly targeted. Totally get that. However, and this is like, okay, new information. You've heard new opinions and want to take care of things. So, you change my opinion a little bit. One of my main criticisms of Silver over the past 12 years is I think he's had a number of successes. I think he doesn't get enough credit for navigating the COVID season as safely and as responsibly as one could and still have a finished season. And I think that was underrated in helping convince the owners on how much money was worth losing versus how much money is worth gaining and that sort of thing. Don't need to get into something that happened 5 years ago. Anyways, I think Silver's a little underrated as far as some of the big decisions he's made. But, you watch his presentations every All-Star break at the Tech Summit, and he doesn't feel like a very convictive guy. He also is someone who I have criticized him for constantly chasing the quick buck instead of making sure the league is in a good place for years. And I still have those criticisms, right? I don't think he's as forceful with his ownership class as David Stern was. Now, he has to deal with a very, very different class of ownership than David Stern ever had to. So I think that's worth noting. However, I just don't think Silver has been strong enough on some of the more permanent, the long-standing success of the league issues as Stern was. And I think this is a good little bit of Sternism from Silver, that he is taking a stand and he is saying, guess what, guys? Party's effing over. Stop doing the nonsense. And we're not going to be the tanking police, but guess what? If we have to just throw out a random big old fine out there and be a real jerk about it one time and you'll treat us seriously, that's what we're trying to accomplish now. And we are going to completely destroy this issue in the summer. I like that little bit, like, and I like having a forceful commissioner because it's a rare, if not only unique, role in world business, the role of a commissioner. The commissioner in these collectively bargained leagues, the NFL, the NBA, NHL, all this good stuff, they have tremendous power, like wildly despotic power. Their only check is the owners who can vote them out and who pay their salaries. So there's a little bit of moral hazard that, like, yes, they have to be beholden to the owners. But the owners also expect that the commissioner has the interest of the league always at heart. And you have to build up those relationships and do that. So you have to be building enough of a relationship to be able to use your despotic powers, right? And this is Silver. It's Silver. There was an athletic report that Silver got all 30 GMs on the phone. And they even said, like, he sounded David Stern-like. Or he had just a little bit more David Stern-like energy on it. Like, he was not his cordial, collegial attitude that he usually is. But he is the commissioner. He's allowed to take a stand. He's allowed to say, hey, this is how the league is going to operate going forward. As long as you're not effing with the money, which then becomes a CBA issue, because if you're affecting basketball-related income, then it affects the amount of the pie that gets split with the players, and you got to negotiate with the players on these things. But if you're just addressing competition and the commissioner wants to do what he feels is right, he can. So, one thing that I think was on the flip side here, right? So, I'm glad he's taking a little bit more of a forceful approach than just being Adam Silver about it. Unfortunately, I just have no faith in the NBA to approach this with nuance and touch without wielding a crazy big hammer that leads to unintended consequences. Because every year we have 2 to 5 teams tanking, and that's just not really a big deal. This year, coincidentally, we have 7 to 10 teams tanking because of pick protections and lost seasons for a little bit more teams than usual, making way more nightly matchups just untenably awful. You also have the issue, which has pervaded in the NBA, I think, for the past 4 or 5 years, that player availability is in the toilet. And friend of the show and colleague, Ben Gaines, mentioned to me that, like, hey, he's watching Suns Magic today, and Suns don't have Devin Booker, and the Magic don't have Franz Wagner, and what the hell is this game? And so this player availability issue has plagued the league now for quite a while, and resting and all that stuff is why the player participation policy exists in the first place. The player participation policy is not for tanking. The player participation policy was to force teams to stop resting guys who could play if they're 99.9% healthy. You know, I know Franz Wagner is legitimately hurt right now. I actually don't recall Devin Booker's injury off the top of my head. But if you combine player availability for health reasons or resting reasons with the greater number of tanking teams this year than most years would have been, this is a weird, shitty NBA season, regular season. I think the playoffs are going to be amazing, by the way. Jason Tatum looks like he's healthy pretty soon. It's going to be exciting. So those two issues make the NBA this season look way more awful than it typically is. So, to repeat what I said, I just have no faith in the NBA to not overreact to that and completely overcorrect. I had extreme alarm when a quote was released from his press conference or his internal meeting with the 30 general managers when he told Sean Marks, the GM of the Brooklyn Nets, that your only incentive will be to win next year. That scares me. Because I don't want the NBA to do things that doesn't allow bad teams to get better organically. And if teams are incentivized to mortgage their future to sign bullshit players to fill out a rotation and screw up their salary cap to win 31 games, which the Sacramento Kings love doing that naturally, so they don't have an issue with this, but I think teams should be allowed to be naturally bad. You're trying, and as much as like the fine affected the Jazz, I agree. By the way, like this should not be happening in February. There are so many games that are like, I don't want to watch that. I don't want to watch that. I don't want to watch that. I agree. There are too many bullshit games that shouldn't be compared to a team who just has a lot of young players and is naturally bad. Like, the Nets don't own their draft pick next year. Let's presume the Nets own their draft pick next year. Is Sean Marks thinking he's got to go into the offseason signing bullshit players to play over his 5 first-round draft picks from this past summer? I feel like Sean Marks, if the Nets had their draft pick, should be allowed to go into the 2027 season saying, or the 2026-2027 season saying, we're not signing players to play over these second-year players. We got Michael Porter Jr. to sell some tickets and everything, and we'll try to play him 60 to 70 games to not get fined. but I don't want to have to, like, Yusuf Nurkic, right? Like, I guess they have Nick Claxton. I'm just trying to think of like a random stopgap player, like signing all these players to expensive deals in situations that don't warrant it. Because that's how a team goes from being really bad to treadmill of mediocrity. That's how you turn into a persistent 30-win team. You have to get a star eventually. Either that's from growing your young players, or that's from being bad and getting a good draft pick who turns out to be a star. So the NBA feels like they're dead set on removing all incentive for all teams, and this feels like it's going to be a wild overcorrection. That I'm pretty scared about the overcorrection. Remember, this problem only exists because of the wildly outsized import of generational prospects. If you get a top 1-2 player in a draft in a good draft year, doesn't have to be even a Wemby or a Flag, but I mean those guys certainly help. But even this year, like you get a Debanza or a Peterson or a Boozer, that changes your trajectory of your team because of how few players are on your team, how few players play on the court at any one time, and how much a very good young player who's on a cheap rookie contract can drive winning if you can fill out the roster with other players in a salary cap league. It's a bigger problem in the NBA because of that reason and that reason alone. That is structural. That will never change. Unless you get rid of the salary cap, which will never happen, right? So if these young generational prospects are always going to drive the next successful thing in the NBA, I really think the only thing you can really do is make some minor tweaks. I have some stronger thoughts on what we should do. I mentioned last week about my abolish the draft idea. It's abolish the draft with weight, though. Like, it's not just like, oh, everyone's a free agent, now everyone's going to sign with the Lakers. Listen to my thoughts last week. You abolish the draft, but not only do you have a salary scale for it, but you also allow the worst teams to execute a match-based system where they're allowed to pick among 4 or 5 players. And if their top 4 choices don't choose the Kings, for example, then they're guaranteed to at least get their 5th choice. So it gives more of choice to the players, but it still gives the worst teams a chance to choose their fate. But with the suggestions I want to propose here, I'm taking into account Adam Silver's assumed prerequisite here, which is he wants to make sure teams are winning until the end of the season at all times. And I think there could be some problems with that. But if that's a prerequisite, let's go with it. First of all, let me say I am, after listening to everyone's opinions, I used to be in favor of this and now I'm super not. The idea of after a certain date, like at the trade deadline or the All-Star break, that wins count towards your lottery luck and your ping pong balls instead of losses. I just don't support that. I think it leads to very, very, very problematic things. One, because my number one principle is making sure that bad teams can get good talent. I think that's being underrated as people talk about this. Bad teams need good talent. They need opportunities for good talent. You cannot take that away. And if you have a team who is naturally bad, which happens every year, if the Kings have Sabonis and Levine, who are now out, they're each out for the season with their own respective surgeries, even if they're playing those guys, the Kings are naturally bad. And if they can't win games because of whatever reason, I don't think that they should be punished in the lottery for it. So I think this unfairly punishes the naturally bad teams and leads to those naturally bad teams making a moral hazard decision of signing shitty mid-tier players, Zach Randolph, George Hill, cough cough, to try to be a 30-win team next year, and it just does not work for helping get better talent to bad teams. Two, I think teams would just tank earlier. I think they would figure it out and they would tank their asses off in December and January. Like, they would figure it out, man. The Jazz were tanking in December already. They were taking random nights off. Once Walker Kessler went down, they realized, like, oh, I do think Austin Ainge was honest with everyone when he said, like, we're not going to be tanking this year, because I think he thought we would be naturally bad enough to not need to. But then Keontae George got a whole lot better. And we had to make some adjustments to our strategy. So that's one thing that I think I'm not in support of. But here are my... So, and I don't think there's, like, another thing that I think is important to note. I don't think everyone's like, oh, here is my proposal, and here's my one idea. And I think that's a mistake to think of this so binary, like it's either this or that. I think you can introduce a couple of, and I hope Adam Silver approaches it this way. You can add a couple of small tweaks that collectively help change the incentives enough. You don't have to completely throw everything out the window and do one wildly new thing, and that's the new thing. I think you can make some small tweaks around the edges, and that helps fix it. So here are my small changes. One, this is the easy one. I think this will be implemented. You've heard people talk about this 100,000 times. You eliminate the mid-lottery pick protections. Maybe you keep top 3, maybe you keep top 4, and you definitely keep the lottery protected picks. But we have seen, it's not just the Jazz and Wizards this year. This has happened for many years. For many, many, many years. Happened with the Sixers last year. That if a team owns a mid-lottery protected pick, they will suddenly find themselves tanking in the middle of the lottery to keep that pick. And that's how you've created a problem from just 2 to 5 teams tanking every year to suddenly you have 8 or 9 teams tanking every year. Now, Adam Silver wants there to be 0 tanking teams, so we got to do some more things. But that at least reduces the number from 8, upwards of 8, 9 tanking teams a year, which is, right now we have 10 tanking teams, right? Let me look at this real quick. Pull up Tankathon. Maybe just 8. Yeah, so obviously Sacramento, Indiana, Brooklyn, not New Orleans because they don't own their pick. Washington, Utah, Dallas, Memphis. That's 7 teams, actually. So it's not, everyone's like, oh, a third of the league is tanking. A third of the league is not tanking. 7 teams are tanking. That's still 4 more than should be than we should have, but it's 7, not 10 or 11. Chicago should be tanking. They're not. They've lost 8 in a row. Maybe if you want to add them as the 8th, I wouldn't argue too much about it, but I think Chicago is actually trying to make the play-in game still. They're only 2 games out, I think. Milwaukee, not tanking. They should. They won't. Charlotte's not tanking. Atlanta's not tanking. Portland's not tanking. The LA Clippers are not tanking. So reducing it down to 3 to 5 teams every year, I think is an acceptable level of suck. 5 is probably a little high, but I think it's an acceptable level. But what else can you do? Okay. I don't think this idea is being explored enough, and I'm hoping it gets some traction as I think about it. I think you should lose lottery balls for every game you fall under 22 wins. You don't lose your draft spot entirely or your entirely lottery odds, but it's a sliding scale based on how many you lose. I can play around with that number 22 wins too. Maybe 21, maybe 23, maybe 24, who knows. I think if you had so I'm looking at the Kings right now, 12-46, right? And I think if they had to try their ass off to get to 22 wins, they would have done things differently for months now. Played different players, whatever. Sacramento, I do struggle with them specifically because I think they're just a classic example of a naturally organic, farm to table bad team, right? And so I don't want to hurt that team too much. So if I can but Sacramento has already started completely dropping the thread in the season, right? So what if Sacramento had a little bit more incentive? Now they did play Keegan Murray the other night today against the Spurs. They actually looked a little feisty against the San Antonio Spurs. This is the kind of behavior you want to incentivize. So that can Sacramento get 10 more wins the rest of the way? They absolutely cannot. But if they already had 15 or 16 wins, could they get 6 more wins the rest of the way? I bet you they could. And if they couldn't, well, you just lose you lose a few lottery balls. Not a ton, but enough to say, well, we got to win some games the rest of the way. And Indiana's not tanking, and Brooklyn's not tanking, and Washington's not tanking, Utah's not tanking. It's just like so Utah's at 18 wins, right? Like, can the Jazz might not win 4 more games with the way they're playing, right? This would at least say, like, you got to at least get to 22, man. You got to get to 22. And if they put out a good team against, they're like, well, all right, we'll try to win the winnable games, and we're going to play all our guys against Indiana or Sacramento or something, and then Indiana, Sacramento's like, oh shit, Utah's playing their full roster, we're so screwed. I think if you lose a few lottery balls for every win you don't get to 22, it incentivizes, it's a carrot to help you not super tank and do Walker Kessler 7 threes and Mark Madsen or whatever. That was a callback. Was it Mark Madsen? I always forget his name. Mark Madsen. Tanking. Yeah, it was Mark Madsen going 0 for 7 on 3-pointers and 2 overtimes. Oh my God. So that's the second thing. So, all right. We're eliminating mid-lottery protections. You lose lottery balls if you're falling below 22 wins. So we're helping remove the mid-tank, and we're helping the real super tankers give a shit at the end. I think that's enough. But if you think we need to be more aggressive, if Adam Silver's really thinking I think he's going to overcorrect. So if I'm working in Adam Silver's legal and competition department, which actually would be a fun job, I'd like to do that someday. If I'm in that department, Adam Silver says, you need to be more aggressive. I want to flatten all the lottery odds. Okay. I think that unfairly punishes the naturally bad farm-to-table bad teams. Here's how I can add some dressing to completely flattening the lottery odds. Like that means that all 14 teams have a 14% chance? That's not right. 9% chance. 7% chance. So 7.14% chance. If you flatten the lottery odds for all 14 lottery teams who don't make the playoffs, they each have a 7% chance of getting the number 1 pick. And Adam Silver told me, you have to do this. We're going to flatten the lottery odds, which would surely curb tanking. Like, that would absolutely do the job. It would be an overcorrection that would punish the naturally bad teams. Because then they could just never, ever get a good player. Like, there's a very good chance that they just don't get the good players. You also run into a Shaq Penny situation where the same team gets the number 1 pick 2 years in a row, even though they just super don't need it, right? The number 1 pick. So here's how you add some window dressing to flattening all the lottery odds. One, you limit how high a team can jump, like the NHL draft. So the NHL draft, they don't have flattened lottery odds. They have a more classic NBA style where it's 25% chance to the worst team getting the number one pick. They have separate issues. But they still have a limit on how high a team can jump because they don't want the kind of bad teams to get the number one pick. And so if you have all these flattened lottery odds, no one wants the LA Clippers getting the number one pick. No one wants the Mavericks to get the number one pick again, right? We didn't want to get the number one pick last year. I also think a lot of this lottery reform stuff is a little overbait because like Atlanta moved up in the Ricochet draft out of nowhere. Like it was very rare and unusual that they got that. The Mavericks it was crazy that they got the number one pick. Look, the odds are what they are. If you run the same lottery 100,000 times, that's not going to happen. So if you flatten the lottery odds out, that situation is going to happen more and more and more. So you limit how high a team can jump. In the NHL, it's 10 spots. I think in the NBA, you want to do 8 spots. So the only teams eligible for the number one pick are the 9th worst team down to the worst team. Are the only teams eligible for the number one pick. I struggled with this because I think, okay, if I'm the 10th team and I don't have a chance at the number one pick, I'm going to try to tank my ass off to 9th. And this is where I think the play-in tournament is helpful. I do think there's a risk of the 10th team wanting to tank down to 9th. You want to convince the 10th team that fighting for a play-in tournament spot is better than having a chance at the number one pick. First of all, that number 10 team with flattened lottery odds, that 10th team still has a very good shot at the second pick, a very good chance at the third pick. It's flattened lottery odds. Here's where the play-in tournament helps. I think you add lottery balls to play-in teams. So remember, there's a limit on how high you can move up. So if you're the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th team, and you're in the play-in tournament, 11, 12, 13, 14. You've made the play-in tournament, you didn't make the playoffs. I want to give them lottery balls that allow them greater chances to get the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th picks of the draft. I think it is acceptable to reward play-in teams, ascending teams, with good talent, just not the premier talent in a given draft. I honestly wouldn't have that big of a deal if the Portland Trailblazers got Cam Boozer this year. That'd be pretty cool. If the Charlotte Hornets got AJ DeBanza. Right? Depending on who goes first is what I'm saying, right? Like if they get the 3rd pick because they tried, they did the honorable thing. The Hornets could have tanked this year. LaMelo Ball has an injury. They could suspend him for his car accident last week if they wanted to. No, they did what Adam Silver wants. Okay, great. Let's give him some additional lottery ball. If you're going to flatten the lottery odds as it is, give him some additional lottery balls to help them get the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 6th picks. But we're not going to allow those teams in a flattened lottery odds world to get the number one pick. If in the current lottery structure, they have an infinitesimally small chance of getting the number one pick, and they do, well, that's the lottery for you. We all hate it. I hated the current lottery structure as it is. Again, because I just don't care about 3 teams being bad every year, I just don't have a problem with the classic lottery setting of Yeah, the worst team has a 25% chance of the number one pick. 25% chance is not that high. But, yeah, I think it's fine if the worst team gets the best pick more often than not. And then to combat the chance that, like, good teams could get the third, fourth, fifth, sixth spots, whatever, and you have flat lottery odds, right now, the way the lottery is set up, and this happened to the Jazz last year, the most you can drop is 4 spots because they only draw for the top 4 lottery spots. And so the Jazz fell to 5th. We didn't get any of the first 4 picks and they drove for. They don't draw for the 5th pick. They stopped drawing the lottery at 5. So then it just reverts to reverse standings, right? So the Jazz got the 5th pick. I think with flattened lottery odds, you then need to tell the worst teams you can only slide down 2 or 3 spots. And probably 2, I think. Like if you're the Sacramento Kings, you can say, look, odds are flat. We're sorry you're so bad. You tried, and you're the worst team in the NBA. But the lottery is what it is, flat lottery odds. But we can promise you that if you don't get one of the top 2 picks, you're automatically slotted in at 3. I don't think that means you need to stop the lottery at 3 either. I think you can then redraw for 4th. You can redraw for 5th. You can have the lottery go as many places as you want to. You're just telling teams, hey, if you aren't selected by 2 spots below your standings, you'll get that pick. Maybe 3, now that I think about it. Like, because you're trying to incentivize winning. But again, you have to win at least 22 games, right? So, or you lose lottery balls. Yeah, it probably got to be 3 spots. Because I just don't want to have a situation where 4 really good teams get the first 4 picks of the draft. That would make us feel bad. That's what happened last year. The Mavericks, Spurs, Sixers, and Hornets. Hornets were the only actually bad team who got a top pick, and that felt bad. To me, at least. Okay. Quickly summarize. I think you can solve it all by saying you lose lottery balls if you fall under 22 wins. So that makes all these bad teams are going to try at the end of the year. And if a team finishes with 19, 20, 21 wins because they're just that bad, they're not losing all their lottery picks. And they would still like go from a 14% chance of the number 1 pick to a 10% chance of winning the number 1 pick or an 11% chance. They'd still have like the equivalent of like the 5th worst team of what they have. But like you have to try towards the end of the season. And then if you eliminate those mid-round lottery protections, I think you solve the mid-round tanking. So that's it. Otherwise, while the Jazz will be playing some nonsense players, perhaps in the end of the season, right now, the Jazz have players who are fighting for their basketball lives. And I think they're worth watching for the intensity and their development and where they will fit on next year's team. My name is Mark Pereira. This is Salt City Hoops. Thanks for sticking around. Drop comments wherever you are. I am personally on Blue Sky. The Salt City Hoops account is also still on Twitter. Hit us up there. YouTube comments, Spotify comments, Pigeon Carrier, wherever you are. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. My name is Mark Pereira. Catch you later. Catch you next time.